Hello, everybody. It's Gihan Pereira here. Thank you so much for joining me for this virtual masterclass looking at artificial intelligence for leaders. This particular presentation, I've had more people register for this than for almost any other in the last few years. Not since the middle of 2020. I think when people were registering partly for the content, but partly because they were in lockdown and they just wanted to see somebody else's face. So there's lots of people who've registered. I'm not expecting everyone to be here because many people register just so they can get the recording later. And if that's you, hello. You'll miss out on some of the interactivity we do, but you'll still get value from this presentation. And also, because I'm recording it for the people who are here live, I'll send you as well a copy of the recording later, and you're most welcome to share that with your team as well, and anybody you wish to share this with. It's really important. I think it's really important content, and I just want to get it out to as many people as possible. So my three standard rules of engagement for us for the next hour is I want to give you things to think about and think a little bit differently, and maybe think a bit bigger than you normally would. And if you then need to walk it back later, that's easier than trying to do it the other way around. Be a bit playful in this session. So there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions in the chat room. I'll be asking you questions as we go. There'll be some interactivity for the people who are here live. So take part in that so that you get value from it and other people in the room get value as well. My most important thing for you is I want you to have some actionable things that you can take away and put into place when you're thinking about AI. Because I really want to make this practical. I'll give you some big picture ideas because we're all leaders in the room, and so we need to think at a high level as well. But I want to give you some really practical things to take away as well. So we've got an hour together. Let's make the most of it. And in fact, let's start with one of those things that's looking at what's practical and what's not. So there's a lot of talk about AI at the moment. Unfortunately, a lot of it is hype and negative. So you may have seen this report a few months ago that said 40% of CEOs say that AI is going to destroy us within the next decade. And I think stories like this are rubbish. They're rubbish for us for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was a very tiny segment of CEOs that was surveyed in this survey. And look, I work with a lot of amazing CEOs, and they don't think this way. And the second thing is that they know that this is not really their area of expertise. Why are CEOs talking about the end of humanity? So that's the other reason why this is not particularly relevant for us. But I think the most important reason is that when you see a headline like this, it's not very useful. And whether this is true or not, it doesn't give us something that we can do today to progress, and especially in our role as a leader. So what I want to talk about today are things that are actually true about AI, and I want to start by giving you three undeniable facts about AI, and also make sure that in the rest of the hour that we've got here, that you're going to get things that you can actually put into practice. So my three undeniable facts about AI: it's not new, it's not hype. I should say it's not all hype, because as I said, there is a lot of hype about it, and it is disruptive. So when I talk about disruption, I often say AI is going to be more disruptive for us than COVID. Certainly it's going to last longer than the disruption from COVID, and it's going to have a wider and longer range impact. Disruption isn't always bad, by the way, and so I'm not saying it's going to be completely negative. Coming back to that first point, when I say that it's not new, when I studied at the University of Western Australia more than 30 years ago, and my computer science thesis at the time was about AI. So even at that time, it was a very early version of AI, but people were starting to think about AI. So if you like, I've been tracking and following AI since the 1900s. And it's only now that it's become really mainstream. And we'll talk about why that is and what that means for us. The other thing is that, I've been talking to leaders about this for a while. Even 5 years ago, I dragged out this slide from presentations that I was giving to leaders 5 years ago. So in 2018, I was saying to leaders, these are the things to keep in mind. I was saying 10 years ago, in 2008, it was all about the start of smartphones and social media, and that's going to have an impact on your leadership. Then 5 years ago, in 2013, this is when we started that conversation about maybe we shouldn't be thinking about careers and jobs, but we should be thinking about important future-ready skills. And then, if you remember, 5 years ago was a time when everyone was talking about this war for talent. And I remember saying at the time, 5 years from now, the big thing is going to be AI. Now, you might go, well, Gihan, you're a great futurist. Fantastic. In fact, you should do that. But it wasn't a very difficult prediction for me to make because people had been talking about AI for a long time. I had been advising my clients at the time for almost a decade about the growth of AI. But it's not just experts and people in the technical area who were talking about AI and using it. Ordinary people were using it. So, for example, in 2020, towards the end of 2020, we were still like in the pandemic. Oracle did a survey of employees around the world, and they asked them, "How are you coping with the pandemic?" And not surprisingly, most of them said, "This is the worst year we've ever had for stress and anxiety and mental health." What was surprising is that 2 out of 3 people said they would rather talk about their mental health issues and stress and anxiety to AI than to a human. And this is before ChatGPT, right? This is before we all knew about it. The following year, Oracle did the same survey. Again, a similar result. Another thing that came out of the 2021 survey was that 4 out of 5 people said they would rather talk to AI about helping them with their career than to their manager, their leader, their HR, or a career counselor. So these are people who are using AI and trusting AI even before we've had this huge explosion, this tipping point from ChatGPT. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a preview of where we are at the moment. I just want to frame up where we are, where we're going for the rest of this session. I want to talk about 3 things broadly. So I want to talk about data, and don't worry, this is not going to be really technical things about ones and zeros and bits and so on. I want to talk about what AI means for our teams. Because we are leaders and we have to kind of lead our team through this very complex and uncertain and fast-changing world of AI. And the third area is some of the important governance issues like around security and privacy, confidentiality, bias, risk, ethical issues. And I've got enough time for you to ask questions in each of these areas. If you'd like to if I can give you a quick preview of what might be coming up in each of these 3 areas, just so you get an idea of where we'll be before the session ends. So like in that first area, we're talking about data, but we're talking about data, and I'll give you some examples about how you can use AI to boost your productivity. In the second area, when we're talking about your teams, I'm going to talk about the changing nature of work as a result of automation and AI. And in the third area, when we talk about some of those risks, problems, and challenges, we'll go through some of these things that you can see here. Don't worry, we'll talk about these in more detail, so you don't have to be trying to frantically write everything down. Okay, you might remember early in the pandemic when people were saying we're all in the same boat. And it's true that for many people, this was their first global pandemic. I think unless you were an older gay man, this was your first pandemic. And people were saying we're all in the same boat. And I think it's not true. We were all in the same storm, but each of us had their own little boat to navigate through that storm. And it's true not just when there's a global crisis like a pandemic, it's true when there's any kind of disruption. We've all got this AI storm that's hit us now, and we've all got our own little boats to navigate through that storm. And typically what happens in disruption is we go through these 3 phases. So the 3 phases, they follow this curve. So there's crisis, recovery, and growth. When you think about the performance of yourself, your team, your organization. So the first thing that happens is when the storm hits, we go into crisis mode and we're just reactive. So it's like you're hit by the storm, there's a hole in your boat, you forget about where you're going, you forget about what direction you're facing, all you're trying to do is bail out the water. Then, after you get over that crisis point, you go into recovery, and I think many people here now are in that recovery mode when it comes to AI. So the crisis has hit, and now we're looking at what are we going to do about it. As an example, so in the education sector, many schools and universities banned the use of ChatGPT as a first reaction to the crisis, because they said we need to ban it and then figure out what we're going to do. And many of them are now looking at what's the next step. How can we be responsive to the changes rather than purely being reacting to the crisis? The third area is when you get beyond that point, you're starting to look at being proactive and how we're going to continue growing, with or without AI, and preferably with. So those are the three areas where the three stages we go through, and the three ways that people respond. There's actually a fourth one. Some organizations use the crisis to be disruptive. So they take advantage of the crisis. So we're doing this on Zoom today, and Zoom is a company that flourished as a result of the COVID crisis, and they were disruptive because they had an opportunity to disrupt what was already there. And there were many other established online meeting platforms, but Zoom took this opportunity to disrupt. And they not only disrupted online meeting platforms, but they disrupted the way their presentations are run. So of course we still have in-person presentations, but so we have so many more on Zoom or Teams or WebEx or GoToWebinar. And a lot of that's happened because of the crisis. The same's true of AI as well. So we've got this, many people see this as a crisis because they didn't realize the power of ChatGPT until November last year. And a few are going to use this as a stepping stone to disrupt. I was working with a group of school leaders a couple of days ago. Some of them are here in the room today. And I asked them, I said, look, where are you at the moment? And where do you want to be? And at the end of the session that we did about AI and what it means for them, I said, put up your hand if you are going to use this as an opportunity to disrupt. And a couple of people who immediately said, yes, we're going to use this as an opportunity to, not exact words that they used, but we're going to use this as an opportunity to position ourselves as a school which is going to get your kids ready for an AI ready future and an AI powered future. And they're using this to disrupt, and so it's going to be a positioning and a competitive edge for them. Okay, so let me talk about, let's do a quick poll, because I'd like to know where you are at the moment. Just by the way, so I did this poll for this group, and this is the group that I was talking about. I did this for them a couple of days ago. I called it a poll, but it's actually a word cloud. And I asked them, what does AI in schools mean for you? And I'm not expecting you to read through all the responses there, but there's opportunities, there's people are thinking about plagiarism, and there are some positives and negatives and so on. And I was just thrilled to see this range of responses. So I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. And obviously it's not about AI in schools, but what does AI mean for you as a leader? And I'd like you to think, before you answer that question, think about something that Edward de Bono said. So he said, whenever you see a new idea or you come across something that you haven't before, think about it using this PMI framework: plus, minus, and interesting. What's positive about that? What are the benefits of this for me? What's negative? What are the drawbacks? And what might be, I'm not quite sure whether it's positive or negative, but I'm thinking, that's kind of interesting. Tell me more about it. So I'm going to ask you to do this, to respond to this question, and I'd like you to, I'd invite you to respond any way you wish, plus, minus, or interesting. And you'll see when you get to the response screen that you can actually respond in more than one way. So you might have a plus and a minus, or 3 interestings, or whatever you like. Okay, so you can see the responses. Thank you very much for responding so promptly. That's great. Great to see some of these responses coming in. Fantastic. Okay, crying in the shower. I've never had that response before. Uh, I saw one that just flashed up there, firing employees quicker. We'll talk about that. It's not human enough. More yelling. A point of difference. Early adopters. Additional support. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, let that go for a couple more minutes. Sorry, not a couple more minutes. Just a little bit more. Great. Okay, thank you everyone for participating in that. As you can see here, there's a range of responses of how people are feeling about AI at the moment, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be because, as I said, we've all got our boats that we're navigating through this storm, and we're going to respond to it differently. So let's look at this first area, which is looking at data. So I want to talk about the idea that AI gorges itself on data. So the more data you get, the more useful the AI, the more powerful the AI becomes. So let me give you a story. This is a true story from almost, well, it's more than 20 years ago now. This was a company called Target in the USA, big retail store, big retail chain, similar to Target in Australia, even though they're different companies. And this happened, that this is 20 years ago. Target was using AI. And what they did was they sent in the mail order catalog in the mail, because this is in the days of when they were sending paper catalogs, they sent it to a teenage girl, and the catalog was full of ads for baby products and maternity products. And her parents were furious. And then the dad stormed into his local Target store with the catalog and said, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get my daughter pregnant? It turned out that she was already pregnant. She just hadn't told her parents yet. But because Target had this AI that was looking at her previous buying patterns, it was able to guess that possibly she was pregnant. So maybe it might be useful to send her a catalogue of baby products and maternity products. So this is a very early use of AI, and as you can see, like almost 20 or more than 20 years ago. And of course, I mean, this raises some questions about privacy and ethics and so on, but this was how powerful AI was even 20 years ago, and it's become even more powerful now. This is my stepdaughter Abby. So she's been out of uni for a few years now as a physio, and when she was studying at uni, she used to do some casual and part-time work for me, helping me run some of my workshops. And so she's seen me and she's heard the messages that I've been sharing. And about 5 years ago, I was talking a lot about AI. And a few weeks ago, she said to me, hey, Gihan, you've been talking about AI for years. How come people are only just learning about it now? And I want to say, well, Abs, it's because I'm a futurist, I'm ahead of the curve, and more people should be employing me and talking about, engaging me to talk about the future. And look, I like to think that's true. But there's been a big change between AI then, even 5 years ago, and AI now. So at the time, I was talking about things like AI in healthcare, like looking at medical images and diagnosing them better than medical professionals could. AI was being used in things like bank loans and mortgages. If you've applied for a mortgage any time in the last 5 years, it's almost certainly been touched by AI in the application process. Companies are using AI to decide, as part of their recruitment and onboarding, to decide who gets promotions. So all of that is now, there's a lot of AI being used in that area. There's another example in insurance where insurers are using AI to assess risks. When people apply and they customize their insurance based on what AI thinks is their risk as an individual. So all of that changed, and this is still happening, but all of that changed when we got ChatGPT in November 2022. So the big difference between the AI I was talking about at the time and ChatGPT is where AI gets its data from. And it's between internal and external. So all those things I was talking about before were AI operating on internal data, like a patient scan or a patient's loan application, customer's loan application, or insurance application, or your employee data to see who might be suitable for a promotion. This is really powerful. ChatGPT came along and it operates on external data. So it's been trained on all this external data, and we can use that without having to unleash it on our internal data, or even get our internal data up to a state where we can use AI on it. So both of these are powerful, and operating on your internal data, I think, is where you're going to get the real leverage, the real power, but it takes some time to get there. So you may have all these data systems, this technology that doesn't talk to each other, and some of it's really old, and some of it's still done on paper, and some of it is not very secure. So there's a lot of work to get to the point where you can AI can operate on that data. And there you've got free ChatGPT. Equally, ChatGPT is available now, but it's not as powerful as when it operates on your internal data. So right now, the biggest use of AI that you can get immediately, I reckon, is to boost your productivity. And whenever I talk to leaders, I say, think about how much time you spend with emails and spreadsheets and reports and PowerPoint presentations and all of these things. And you can use ChatGPT as an assistant to help you with these things. Okay, we'll come back to that, but these are the sort of things that you can get instant value from ChatGPT. So instant, in fact, that like I run this masterclass, I'll tell you more about that at the end, but what I do is I say, so it's practical, it's interactive, people turn up with their laptops, it can be online as well, and I say, come and spend half a day with me. I can guarantee that when you walk out, you will gain at least an hour a day of productivity from now on. Okay, because we're using these tools like ChatGPT. Okay, so I'm actually going to demonstrate one of these tools. It's not ChatGPT because I like to, I'm happy to share ChatGPT in some of my presentations, but I also want to expose you to a couple of other tools. This one here is one that Sharon, who's in the room today, a client of mine, she asked me, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I said, oh, look, I'll demonstrate this one in my next presentation. So Sharon, I know you're here. So this is for you, but it's also for everybody else. So this is a tool for creating slide decks or PowerPoint presentations. Okay, so it's called gamma.app, and we're going to do a live demonstration of that now. Let me show you one. I did one in diversity, equity, and inclusion in real estate. So let me show you what that looked like. Okay, so that's basically what I said. I was working with the real estate group, I said, and create a presentation about diversity, equity, and DEI. I actually said DEI. I assumed the AI would be smart enough to know what that meant. Trends in real estate. And this is what it created. I've changed it. I put a picture of Perth in there because I was demonstrating how to change images once you've got it. But everything else is what it created. I have not done any other editing apart from just the picture on the front slide. Okay, so this is what it created. Here are the slides. Now, before it created those slides, it gave me an overview of the slides it was going to create, and I could choose and I could change the topics, and then it went ahead and created them. Okay, any of these things. So this was created, like this was what, maybe about 10 slides, and anything in here we can now edit. So if I didn't want, if I wanted to change the British or Australian spelling, we could do that. If I want to change the picture, I can do that. If I want to add new slides in here, I can do that. They call them cards. But this is what was created from scratch within about 3 minutes. Okay, all the images were there. So you'll see there's some things here which it's got wrong, like equity. It's got a picture of debt and equity, which has nothing to do with DEI. But some of the other things are okay. And if you don't like the pictures, you can change them. So if I want to edit an image here, it'll give me the option of either doing a web image search, or there are other ways to get images. Okay, I can upload images, I can generate images on AI, so that also uses up some of your credits, which is why I've just run out of them. Or you can look at places where you can get free images like Unsplash. Okay, you can search Unsplash for images around diversity and insert an image. Okay, ask me questions about this one. Oh, also I can also shift this to export this to PowerPoint. So I can do all my editing, I can do as much editing as I want in here, and then I can also say export this as a PowerPoint file, which I can then do other editing on, add my own templates and so on. Ask me some questions about this. Okay, so Christy says, how much input did you include at the start? So Christy, the input I included at the start, it says, what do you want to create a presentation on? And I said, DEI trends in the real estate industry. Literally, that's all I typed in. Okay, and everything else it created. So basically use that as the title and then created everything else. As soon as you say that, it then says, here's my list of slides that I'm going to create. Are you happy with them? And you can edit them, you can change the titles of the slides. I didn't change anything. I didn't change anything else, and then it created this. Yeah, perhaps. Okay, so good. So questions coming in. Let me address some of these. Perhaps AI will end up devaluing such presentations as it will become too easily produced. So this is so I want to say this about any time you use AI, you use it as an assistant, not as an expert. So if you're in real estate and you're saying that here are some of the trends, for example, there are things like accountability barriers and so on. These are things that you, as an expert and a leader, should know. So then you should apply your intelligence to the artificial intelligence. So AI has done the heavy lifting for us in creating these slides and creating some basic content, but it's not an expert, and you should not rely on it as an expert. You should think of it as an assistant. So, for example, that example that I showed, that picture, if you showed this presentation to anyone who understands what DEI is, they just laugh, because you've got this debt and equity image in there, which has nothing to do with what it means in DEI terms. Is this plagiarism? So not necessarily. So there's some interesting questions about where AIs get their data from, especially with generating pictures. And so there's some interesting questions around that. And the question that Carly asked as well, how do you know what resources it pulled this data from? So with this tool, you don't know. But again, I think this is up to us to evaluate whether what it's saying is relevant and accurate, rather than trusting it. Okay, so we trust it to create visually appealing slide deck here. That's what we're getting our AI to do. We then have to make sure that everything that it's saying is valid. Can you give it some information to work with and build on? Yes, you can. You can, Andrew. So it doesn't have to be just give me some trends. That said, whenever I've done this with specific industries, you may have seen one in agriculture. Again, we did something very similar, and I was working with a very large, like a very well-known agriculture group in Australia, and the executive team, and they said, yeah, actually this is pretty much what we'd say when we're talking to customers and when we're looking at our future. So it's actually doing a reasonably good job. That said, don't ever trust it 100%. Trust it to build the slides for you and to find images and to create slides in an attractive format, but don't trust the content. Kirsten, can you upload a paper and get it to translate to a presentation? Yeah, I'm not sure, Kirsten. We might talk about that. I'll look into that before we meet and I present this to your group as well. There's certainly things that you can do with ChatGPT where you can upload a paper and you can create like infographics and mind maps and diagrams from that. I don't know whether Gamma does that. Sarah says, do you have to give the time frame, the number of slides? Can you ask to put presentation notes? Yeah, I'm not sure about those details, Sarah. So Jonathan's question, which Delia has asked, will AI reference its sources? So this one doesn't, but you can get ChatGPT, for example, to reference its sources. Jan says, is that not double handling? I think you're asking, Jan, about whether you're creating Gamma, export to PowerPoint, and then you have to edit it again there. Yes, so you pick and choose which you do. So you can export this directly to PowerPoint and then do your editing there. Or you can do a lot of editing in here. Like, for example, I would use this to find images because it's easier to do this. It's more powerful in here to find images than in PowerPoint, and then export it to the last little bits and pieces. Wendy says, is this a AI tool you would recommend? No, it's not necessarily. I'm not necessarily recommending it. However, some people here will say this is fantastic because in a few minutes I can create my draft PowerPoint presentation. I think, Wendy, you might be asking a different question. Is it the AI tool you recommend for preparing PowerPoint presentations rather than website? You can present this directly here. If I press the present button, it'll present directly on the web page as well without using PowerPoint. That's an option as well. Tim says, thanks, Gihan. Don't trust the machine. Are there other known issues with this tool that you're aware of? Look, we'll talk about some of the risks, problems, and challenges. So we'll talk about that later. Sarah's question about can you give it the number of slides and so on? Delia's actually answered that. Yeah, so that's exact, and Delia's answer is exactly right. So what I did was I just said, here's a topic, and it generated this content, and I'm kind of at the mercy of whatever it chooses. If you give it more information, then it will create a presentation based on the information you've given it. Yeah, so David said he's done one that's got a whole bunch of facts wrong. Yeah, and that's right. So that's what you're going to find with all of these AI tools. It's going to make up stuff. Right? All of these AI tools, these generative AI tools, like ChatGPT, like Gamma, they're people pleasers. They want to give you responses that it thinks you're going to be happy with, whether or not those responses are accurate. So this is why I always say treat AI as an assistant, not as an expert. Okay, good. Let's move on. So Gamma is a really powerful tool for this, for creating PowerPoint presentations, and is one of the things that you can use to boost your productivity. There's a whole bunch of others here, and I won't go into these in detail because we looked at one in depth. But all of these, by the way, all of these on this screen here, on this slide, you can do with ChatGPT. If you've got the paid version of ChatGPT, which is $20 a month, so it's like 30 Aussie dollars, like $1 a day. And so I say it's about the same as my KO subscription, and you can do that for $1 a day. You get access to an AI assistant that will help you boost your productivity in many areas. And there's also another website which is it's called There's an AI for That. It's got thousands of new AI tools. I don't recommend that you use this because, and I heard another AI speaker say, go to this and whatever you're interested in, customer service or creating a brochure, find review and research the AI tools there. I don't think that's your job. Your job should be to listen to people like me saying, hey, here's a really useful tool for creating slide decks, and then you should use it if you think it's worthwhile. You shouldn't be going and evaluating all the 8, 9, 10, 20 other tools for creating slide decks. If you use a Microsoft suite of products, and I'm sure many of you do, then if you're using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, and Microsoft is investing billions and billions of dollars into adding AI to those, and they're all going to be integrated. So that's going to be really powerful in the future. Okay, let me go into the second area. I don't want to spend a lot of time in this area, which is bringing your team along on the journey. I just want to tell a little story, and then we'll get into the last area, which is about governance and some of the risks, problems, and challenges around this. So at the moment, And for the foreseeable future, AI and humans working together are better than either of them alone. And it's really important to understand that there are people on your team who are, some are really excited and enthusiastic about AI, some are still nervous and cautious about it, and that's okay. There's a really important thing that I think you need to do to bring them along on the journey. And it's got nothing to do with technology. In fact, let me tell you this story. Nordstrom. You may know Nordstrom. It's a high-end retail store in the USA. It's been around for a long time, and they've always had this reputation for putting the customer first. So they say the customer's always right. Do whatever you can to please the customer. There's some famous stories about how Nordstrom staff helped customers, went above and beyond. And my favorite story is about a Nordstrom customer who brought back a set of car tires, brought them into the counter, returns counter, and said, I want to return these and I want my money back. And the customer service rep said, no problem, sir, how much did you pay? And gave him his money back. Nordstrom doesn't sell car tires. But that customer service rep recognized that because the Nordstrom brand and the value that they would get from that reputation, it was worth more than the money they lost in giving cash back for product that they don't even sell. So this is not a story about customer service, because this is a story about leadership, because that customer service rep knew that he was going to be fully backed by his manager, because the managers trust people to do the right thing. In fact, when Nordstrom employees come into work and when they're employed for their first day, they get given the Nordstrom manual. And the manual goes like this. Here are the rules. Rule number 1, use your best judgment at all times. And then there are no other rules. Okay, now anyone who's in Occ Health and Safety and HR, there's got to be a whole bunch of other rules. But if you get that this is up front and center, this is what people are told. People are told, rule number 1, use your best judgment in all situations. There are no other rules. It goes on to say, your manager's door is always open. Feel free to ask them for help at any time. And I reckon this is really important for us. And it's not only to do with AI, but specifically with AI. When you're working with your team, our world is changing so fast now that we cannot rely on processes and systems and the hierarchy that we've had to get things done, because otherwise we're just going to be too slow. We're going to be the bottlenecks, and people following the processes that are going to be obsolete. And so what we need to do is trust people's judgment, and that means building judgment. And if I ask you, I'm not asking you to respond here, how often when somebody comes to you for help or comes to you for advice, would you say, yeah, go ahead, Shamini, I trust your judgment. Go ahead, John, I trust your judgment. And if you're not doing that often, then build up judgment with your team members. There's a whole process we can go through about building judgment, and I don't want to do that here, but we need to trust the judgment of our team members rather than relying on them following processes and relying on them following the hierarchy coming to us whenever they need help, especially in an area like AI. For 2 reasons. 1, is changing really fast, and 2, they might know more about it than you do. That doesn't mean that they know all the safeguards and the guardrails around it. If you think about the future of work, there's this really great book by Ravin Jesuthasan, and I won't go through the whole book, but if you let me summarize this the 4 steps around the future of work. The first one is that when you're thinking about the work that needs to be done, the first thing is you figure out what the work is, what's the outcome that you want. Then you look at how humans and machines are going to work together to do this work. So if it's physical work, it might be humans and robots. If it's knowledge work, it's humans and AI. And then what do you do to how you're employing people? Are they full-time? Are they contract? Are some of them going to be fully remote? Are some of them going to be doing hybrid work? Are you going to bring in experts from the other side of the world on a Teams meeting for particular parts of the work? And figure out how you're going to attract the right talent to get the work done. That's in a more long-term basis. But this is where AI is going to fit in. It's going to be a really important part of the future of work, and it's about people, not just about the technology. Okay, let me move to the third area, and then when we get to the end of this, so actually in this section, I'll give you the chance to ask me some questions as well. So these are some of the governance issues around AI. There's quite a few of them, and let me give you a summary slide, and I'll ask you to ask me some questions about it. And the question might be, what do you mean by that? Okay, I'm okay with you asking me that first. Is there anything that you want me to explain first, like what actually means? And then beyond that, ask me some questions about it. And I will check what are other questions that have come in. Fiona says, I love that people pleaser description. Yeah, I've had grads who don't want to ask for help and they hallucinate facts. Yeah. Yeah, so as Delia says, 80% of the work has been done by AI. So it does the heavy lifting, coming back to the productivity questions. Jonathan says children's rights in this digital age. So ask me a question, please, anyone. I agree that children's rights in this digital age is an issue. So we talked about that with the students, with the school leaders I was working with. When students present assignments, many teachers, many schools now are uploading them to plagiarism checkers, and even now AI plagiarism checkers. And by the way, those checkers are awful. They don't work. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, they had one of their own that would detect AI in written text, so you could upload it and it'll give you a percentage score on how likely it was this was written by AI. The system was so bad, they've shut it down 2 weeks ago. Okay, Kylie's question is a digital divide around tech skill sets. Yeah, look, that's from a leadership perspective. If you're looking internally, are we going to create a digital divide between the people who want to embrace and use AI effectively and those who don't? And are they going to be left behind? In a broader societal perspective, obviously, there are some people who are much more digitally savvy than others. Francis asked an interesting question. Many people have poor literacy. Does AI help or hinder? It's interesting, Francis, because I think it can be either. So we all use AI on our smartphones, whether using Google Now or whether using Siri. And for people who have low literacy, absolutely, it's helping them. I am part of an advisory group talking about aged care, which is advising the Western Australian state government about some of their policies around that. And the last group session that we had was about this idea of digital literacy with older Australians perhaps being less tech savvy. But there are many of them. In fact, somebody in the room said this. My grandmother, she uses Siri all the time, and she finds it so much easier than navigating apps on her phone or looking up websites and so on. And Siri is AI, right? So it absolutely helps in those areas. I was working with a school, and a senior English teacher there. She said, it's really useful. I use ChatGPT to help my students who are dyslexic, because it'll do a little draft, it'll write the draft for them, and then they can edit it. So yeah, it's both. Yeah, so Jonathan asked the question, how do we avoid dumbing our experiences unknowingly? Because the majority will rely on AI as expert. So one of my friends, Niels Vesk, talks about AI for innovation and creativity. So absolutely, you can use it for not dumbing down, because you can use it and just say everyone's going to get the same results or similar results. So we're going to get generic responses, but you don't have to. So some people might remember if you were here at my presentation that I did last month, we used AI. I did a demonstration of using ChatGPT to create product ideas and product names. So you can use AI for things like that as well. Again, you use it as an assistant. It does some of that heavy lifting, some of that initial work, and then you build on that. Okay, Fiona, best app to upload reports, submissions, and self-authored insights to create summaries, media releases, articles, presentations, social media posts in own voice. really good app to do that is ChatGPT. Okay, especially if you use a paid version. So I know an author, she's one of my go-to people that I've followed for more than a decade now around AI and technology in the future. Joanna Penn, Penn. Joanna Penn, if you like listening to podcasts, she's got a great podcast. So she uses ChatGPT. So she's a published author. She has uploaded all her books into ChatGPT. So there's no copyright and privacy issues. They're her material. And then when she wants ChatGPT to assist her in writing her next novel, and she asks it to generate a paragraph or an outline, it'll do it in her voice because she's taught it her voice. So yeah, you can absolutely use ChatGPT for that. ChatGPT Plus, yeah, the paid version. Okay, so I was going to bring up this question, this thing around Microsoft. Um, Kelvin's asked a question, is Microsoft Copilot going to replace most of the human work in CPA firms like bookkeeping, auditing, and completing tax returns? Yeah, look, I think a lot of repetitive work, whether it's going to be done by like tools like Microsoft Copilot, or, okay, let me just throw this out there. There's another process called robotic process automation, RPA. Robotic process automation is taking repetitive tasks that you do all the time and just basically doing them. So, for example, if you get an invoice, and then it might be attached as a PDF. You have to open that, copy and paste your supplier name into some database, and copy the amounts in there, and then it goes into some database for payment, and then the payment happens. And you do this by physically moving your mouse to different places. It moves it on the screen and so on. RPA copies what you do. Okay, so that it'll connect systems that aren't already connected by doing these repetitive tasks for you. So if it's one way that you can do AI, that it's one kind of AI, and it's very big in organizations that have got all these disconnected systems that are using technology that doesn't talk to each other. RPA allows you to automate some of those repetitive tasks. Microsoft Copilot is fantastic if you've got everything using the Microsoft products. Okay, lots of questions coming in. Yeah, okay, Rachel asks, I'm worried about privacy breaches. Who owns the data? Really good, Rachel, that you're worried about it, because I think we all should be. There's very easy because ChatGPT and other tools like that are literally at your fingertips, it's very easy to forget that anything that you give it is owned by OpenAI. So the OpenAI license that says that ChatGPT or OpenAI can use your data for training purposes for when they release the next version of ChatGPT. I reckon if you're using the Microsoft products, and look, I'm not a lawyer, never played one on TV, but I reckon if you're using the Microsoft products, you can have a bit more trust in that, because we already assume that Microsoft is not reading our Word documents or looking at our spreadsheets about our company's figures. So we've got some trust built in, right? Like we use them on that assumption as part of the terms. So when it has its AI operating on your emails or your PowerPoint presentations or your Excel spreadsheets, you can assume that they're going to do it in the right way. So that's less of a concern around privacy. That's my approach on it. As I said, I'm not a lawyer. David says, if you're building your company AI through your own data, what legal permissions do you need from those users? Yeah, absolutely. This is a really big question and a really important one. So I was talking to a healthcare leader, senior healthcare leader in one of Australia's leading healthcare groups. And he said, look, we're just experimenting a little bit with AI, and probably the last thing that we will do is allow the public to get access to patient data that we hold about them, because that's the area that's going to have the biggest risk of problems with privacy, security, confidentiality, laws and regulations. But we're experimenting with it on more internal basis. Yes, Sarah says, what's the best integration for helping to clean up my inbox? There are definitely AIs that will do that. I can't think of the name of them off the top of my head, but there are AIs that will examine your inbox, and they actually go further than that. They'll look at your inbox, they'll draft email replies where it thinks it can draft a reply for you to review and send. It will add tasks to your calendar. There are even AIs. Can't think of the name. There are even AIs that will organize your to-do list and schedule times in your calendar. So schedule your calendar based on what it thinks. You tell it what your priorities are, and it thinks what it thinks are the order you should do your tasks. Okay. Challenging for local government. Yeah, I'm curious to know as well, Rachel, in what way? I do a lot of work with local government. Oh, in the Privacy Act, yeah, absolutely, and look, in healthcare as well. Healthcare provisions are very are much stricter than what happens with the national privacy principles and the broader Privacy Act. For example, Australian healthcare data, we can't store that overseas, all right? We can't store that internationally without very rigorous safeguards. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Okay, let me finish off, because these are really important issues, and when I was speaking with this group of school leaders, in the discussion, a couple of people said, "Look, there seems to be quite a lot of fear in the room," and I said, "It's not really fear. It's just like this is an important part of a role as a leader. It's you can be really gung-ho and look at all the productivity opportunities, look at all the customer experience enhancement opportunities, but leaders should be looking at that, but also have a responsibility to be really clear about some of the governance issues around using AI. So it's really important that we look at things like that." Okay, so just to finish off, so thank you everyone for taking part. I can see more and more questions coming in. I do run an AI at Work masterclass. So as I said earlier, it's basically a half-day workshop. It's really practical, it's really interactive. It talks about people come in, they bring their laptops with them. In fact, the online version, what we do is half day, but we split it over 2 sessions. So the first session I do like demonstrations of some of these tools, then everybody picks a project of their own, they go away and work on it for a few weeks, and then they come back later and we do the second session, and they can ask questions, share feedback, share their experiences. So I actually quite like the online version, apart from the fact that I can run it anywhere around the country, around the world, but I really like it for the fact that we split it into 2 sessions, which is not as practical with the in-person version, because people don't necessarily want to come in twice. Well, they can do that if they want to. As I said, my goal for that is for them to gain at least an hour a day of additional productivity by doing the masterclass. And I know I'm working with some clients, some of them are here already, here in this session today, and working with some clients on exactly that, how I can give everyone in the team an extra hour a day of productivity, or even if it's an hour a week. That's pretty good, right? But just learning how to do these, how to use these tools effectively. So just to finish off, the timing's going perfectly, with this little puzzle that I share with many groups. You might have seen this before, and if you have, then when I ask you for the answer, type it in the chat room. So this puzzle is a puzzle that I remember coming across in primary school. And it goes like this. There's a pond, and there's a lily in the pond. And overnight, that lily splits in 2. So you turn up the first day, there's 1, the next day there's 2, and then overnight, each of them splits in 2. So basically it doubles every day. So you go 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. The pond is full after 28 days, or in 28 days. The question, and you can type it in the chat if you know the answer or you want to guess the answer, when is it half full? Okay, let's see who gets the correct answer first. Oh, John, 27. Oh, lots of people said 27. Great. Okay, 27 days, exactly right. Okay, so here's how the logic goes, right? So in 28 days is full. Because it doubles every day, it's half full. Now, that's a puzzle that I remember reading as a kid, so you can share that with your friends, with your family, with your community, whoever you like. But let's go back a few more days. So 26 days, on day 26 is a quarter full, and then an eighth full, and so on. At the start of that fourth week, and remember there are 3 weeks before that, if you turned up every day for 3 weeks, almost nothing's happened. You see a few scattered lilies in the pond, but it looks almost empty, and you could be forgiven for thinking nothing is going to happen. And yet, in that last week, in the last few days, the pond rapidly fills up. This is because of exponential growth. I did this with a group of accountants, and almost before the words were out of my mouth, everyone said 27, 27, 27, because they understand about compound interest and exponential growth. And our world is growing exponentially. AI is growing exponentially because it's learning from millions and millions and billions of pieces of data and then building on that. So our people are connected exponentially online because social media is all through networks, and networks are exponential. Deadly viruses spread through the world exponentially, which is why we had all that, which is why COVID was such a big risk, and because it grows exponentially. And my point is this, like, just because you see something that's tiny now, don't assume it's going to stay that way forever. It might just be on the start of this massive exponential growth. And I think with AI, well, I know with AI, it's already growing exponentially, and it's growing. The curve is going to be even steeper because we've got the exponential growth of the technology, plus the exponential growth of people who are applying their intelligence to the technology. So this is growing faster and faster and faster. So don't miss the opportunity and stay with it. So my last message is this: don't wait for everything to be perfect. Start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. Thanks everyone for coming along. Thank you very much for participating. Thanks for all your questions. I look forward to finding out more about your journey with AI. I'll see you in the future.